People have asked the question, what is the meaning of life? For as long as humans have been able to speak. It feels like a natural question, almost unavoidable. But before we try to answer it, we should slow down and ask something more basic. Why does this question even exist? The universe itself never asks this question. Rocks don't wonder why they exist. Rivers don't search for purpose. Stars burn for billions of years without questioning their role. So why do we? The strange thing is that everything we know about ourselves says we are made of the same stuff as rocks, rivers, and stars. The atoms in your body obey the same physical laws as the atoms in a distant galaxy. There is nothing special about the particles themselves. And yet, when those particles are arranged in a certain way into a human brain, something entirely new appears. The brain begins to ask questions about itself and about existence. This is already a clue. The question of meaning does not come from the universe. It comes from the structure of the human mind. Imagine a very simple object, like a stone lying on the ground. It has mass, shape, and location. You can describe it completely using physics. Now imagine a human being. You can also describe a human using physics, atoms, molecules, cells, electrical signals, but something extra seems to be there. Thoughts, feelings, curiosity, the need to understand. Meaning appears not as a physical substance, but as an experience. This suggests that meaning may not be something out there, waiting to be discovered, like a hidden law of nature. It may be something that emerges only when matter becomes complex enough to reflect on itself. We often assume that meaning must be fundamental, built into reality from the beginning, but physics teaches us that many important things are not fundamental at all. Temperature, for example, does not exist in a single atom. An atom does not have a temperature. Temperature only appears when many atoms move together in a certain way. It is a collective effect. Meaning may be similar. No single neuron contains meaning. No single atom knows anything. But when billions of neurons interact, the experience of meaning appears. It feels real because it is real to the system experiencing it, even if it is not written into the laws of physics. This is where humans quietly make a mistake. We grow up surrounded by objects that were made for purposes. A chair is for sitting. A clock is for telling time. A phone is for communication. Because everything around us has a purpose, we start to believe that existence itself must also have one. But those objects only have purposes because someone decided they should. Nature does not decide. Nature only follows rules. So when we ask about the meaning of life, we may be asking the wrong kind of question. We are treating the universe like a human-made object, expecting intention where there may only be process. The discomfort we feel when we don't get an answer comes not from the universe being silent, but from our minds expecting a response that physics never promised to give. Once we recognize that the question of meaning comes from the human mind, the next step is to look carefully at what science actually tells us about reality. Not what we wish it said, and not what sounds comforting, but what we can honestly claim to know. Physics is not a collection of deep messages about life. It is a tool for describing how things behave. What we know is surprisingly simple. The universe began in a hot, dense state and expanded. As it cooled, simple particles formed. Those particles combined into atoms. Atoms formed clouds, clouds collapsed into stars, and stars produced heavier elements through nuclear reactions. When some of those elements came together under the right conditions, chemistry became complicated enough to copy itself. That copying process changed over time. Eventually, it produced nervous systems capable of sensing, learning, and remembering. At no point in this long story do we see evidence of intention. No stage announces a goal. Stars do not form in order to create planets. Planets do not exist in order to create life. Life does not evolve in order to produce intelligence. These things happen because the conditions allow them to happen. When conditions change, outcomes change too. This is difficult for humans to accept because our everyday experience is full of intention. When something happens in our lives, we immediately ask why. We look for reasons, motives, and meanings. But physics does not work that way. Physics answers, not why, in the sense we usually mean it. When a rock falls, physics explains how gravity pulls it downward. It does not explain why the rock wanted to fall, because wanting is not part of the description. In the same way, physics can explain how life appeared without explaining what life is. For a common mistake is to confuse function with purpose. A heart pumps blood. That is its function. But the heart was not designed with foresight. Organisms with hearts that pump blood effectively survived longer, and over time hearts became common. The function came first. The idea of purpose is something we add afterward. The same applies to human consciousness. We think, we feel, and we search for meaning because brains that could do these things were better at surviving. A mind that notices patterns, remembers dangers, and imagines the future has an advantage. Meaning making is not a cosmic mission. It is a biological strategy. This does not make human experiences fake or unimportant. Pain still hurts even if it is a nervous system signal. Color still exists even if it is created by the brain. In the same way, meaning feels real because it is real to the organism experiencing it. But its reality does not require the universe to have built it in from the start. When we demand that science provide a final meaning of life, we are asking it to do something it was never meant to do. We are asking equations to comfort us. And equations are honest, but they are not comforting. What science gives us instead is something more unsettling and more truthful, a picture of a universe that operates without concern for meaning, yet produces beings who care deeply about it. Understanding this difference is not the end of the discussion. It is the point where the discussion becomes serious. If the universe does not appear to contain built-in purpose, then we must confront an uncomfortable question. Why does meaning feel so powerful and unavoidable in human life? The answer is not mysterious, but it is deeply counterintuitive. Meaning feels real because the brain is designed to create it, not because the universe requires it. Consider how the brain handles information. It does not passively record reality like a camera. It actively interprets, predicts, and fills in gaps. When you look at the world, you are not seeing raw data. You are seeing a constructed model, assembled from sensory input, memory, and expectation. This model is useful, not necessarily accurate in every detail. Meaning works in the same way. The brain constantly asks, what does this imply? And why does this matter? These questions are not philosophical luxuries. They are survival tools. An organism that treats events as meaningful reacts faster and more decisively than one that does not. A rustle in the bushes is not just sound, it means possible danger. A facial expression is not just muscle movement, it means threat or trust. Over time, this habit of assigning significance spreads beyond immediate survival. Humans begin to connect events into stories. Stories create coherence. Coherence creates the feeling that life is going somewhere. But this feeling arises from the brain's need for order, not from evidence that the universe itself is organized around human concerns. This is where confusion quietly enters. Because meaning is so emotionally convincing, we assume it must be objectively true. We forget that many powerful experiences are internally generated. Color does not exist in the world as we see it. The world has wavelengths of light. The experience of red or blue is something the brain creates. Yet no one would say color is an illusion in the everyday sense. It is a real experience, produced by a real system, interacting with real stimuli. Meaning may belong to the same category. It is not written into atoms or fields, but it emerges naturally when a certain kind of brain interacts with the world. The mistake is not feeling meaning. The mistake is assuming it must exist independently of the mind that experiences it. This explains why people struggle to explain meaning in clear terms. When we try to describe it, we reach for metaphors, stories, or absolute statements. But meaning is not a simple object that can be pointed to. It is a process unfolding moment by moment as the brain evaluates experience. Asking for the meaning of life as a single answer may be like asking for the single meaning of a symphony. The experience depends on time, context, and the listener. There is also another layer of difficulty. Humans are aware of their own mortality. We know our experiences will end. This awareness amplifies the search for meaning. If life were endless, the question might lose its urgency. But because time is limited, the brain demands significance, as if existence must justify its own disappearance. Yet physics remains silent on this demand. The universe does not explain itself to us. It does not promise fairness, closure, or purpose. What it does provide is structure, regularity, and the possibility for complex systems to arise. Meaning is something that happens inside those systems, not something imposed from outside. Understanding this does not remove meaning from life. It relocates it. Meaning is no longer a cosmic instruction. It is an activity of the mind, shaped by biology, experience, and awareness. And that shift, while unsettling, brings us closer to what is actually happening when we ask the question in the first place. At this point, the question of meaning begins to change its shape. Instead of asking what life is for, we begin to notice what life is actually doing. This is a subtle but important shift. Physics rarely tells us what things are supposed to do. It tells us what they do given certain conditions. And when we look at life through that lens, a different picture emerges. Life is not moving toward a final answer. It is exploring possibilities. From the simplest organisms to the most complex minds, life tests what works, what lasts, and what adapts. There is no endpoint written into this process. There is only continuation, variation, and selection. Humans are not the goal of this process. We are one temporary expression of it. What makes our situation unusual is not that we exist, but that we know we exist. The universe has produced a configuration of matter that can look back at itself and ask questions. This does not require a hidden plan. It only requires consistent laws and enough time. Given billions of years, complexity becomes possible, and with complexity comes awareness. From a scientific point of view, this awareness is extraordinary. Not because it fulfills a purpose, but because it allows the universe to be examined from the inside. When you study physics, when you observe nature, when you ask difficult questions, you are participating in a process that began long before you and will continue long after you. The atoms in your brain were once inside stars. Now they are briefly arranged in a way that can think about stars. This perspective changes how we see meaning. Meaning no longer has to be something permanent or universal. It can be local, temporary, and still deeply real. A conversation, a discovery, a moment of understanding may not matter to the universe at large, but it matters within the system experiencing it. Physics does not dismiss such experiences. It simply places them in context. There is a quiet humility in this view. We stop demanding that existence justify itself in human terms. We stop expecting the universe to care about us in the way we care about each other. Instead, we recognize that caring itself is a natural phenomenon. It arises under certain conditions, just like magnetism or pressure. In this way, the hidden meaning of life is not a message waiting to be decoded. It is a relationship between a thinking system and the reality it observes. Meaning happens when awareness meets the world. It is not stored anywhere. It is generated. This does not lead to emptiness. It leads to responsibility. If meaning is not handed to us, then what we pay attention to becomes important. What we choose to understand, to explore, and to question shapes the kind of meaning that exists at all. Not because the universe demands it, but because conscious systems cannot help but create it. In the end, the most honest conclusion science allows is both simple and unsettling. The universe does not explain why you are here, but it allows you to notice that you are. And in that brief moment of awareness, matter becomes curious, reality becomes observable, and existence becomes something that can be experienced, examined, and understood from the inside. That may not be the meaning we were hoping for, but it is the one we can actually defend. There is one final layer to this idea that is easy to miss, because it feels almost too quiet to matter. When we stop demanding a grand, external meaning, we begin to notice something subtle about our relationship with reality itself. The universe is not speaking to us, but it is not hiding from us either. It behaves consistently. It allows itself to be studied, and remarkably, it allows parts of itself to understand other parts. This is not poetic language. It is a physical fact. The atoms in your brain follow the same laws as the atoms in distant galaxies. When you think about the universe is, quite literally, examining itself through a temporary arrangement of matter. There is no intention behind this, no plan guiding it forward. But the result is still astonishing. Human beings often feel small when confronted with the scale of the cosmos. Billions of galaxies, trillions of stars, and a lifetime that barely registers on the cosmic clock. But smallness does not imply irrelevance. In physics, small systems can reveal deep truths. A tiny particle can change how we understand reality. Size is not the measure of significance. What makes our existence unusual is not that we last forever, or that we dominate the universe. It is that we can notice patterns, test ideas, and correct our mistakes. We can learn. And learning is one of the rare processes that actually changes how the universe is understood from within. This reframes the question of meaning once again. Meaning does not have to be permanent to be real. A wave in the ocean does not last, but it still exists. A thought does not persist, but while it is happening, it is fully real. Human lives may be brief, but during that brief time, understanding increases. Knowledge accumulates. Questions become sharper. The universe does not promise that this will continue forever. It offers no guarantee that intelligence is common or rare, lasting or temporary. But for now, it is happening, and that alone is a fact worth taking seriously. When we stop searching for meaning as an answer and begin to see it as an activity, something changes in how we view our place in reality. Meaning becomes something that happens when curiosity meets structure, when questions meet laws that can be tested. It appears whenever understanding deepens, even slightly. This does not make life easier. It removes comforting illusions, but it replaces them with something more durable: honesty. The kind of honesty that allows us to say, "We don't know yet," without despair. The kind that treats uncertainty not as a failure, but as the natural state of a thinking species inside a vast and indifferent universe. In that sense, the hidden meaning of life is not hidden at all. It is overlooked. It is the simple fact that existence has produced observers capable of wondering about existence. Not to fulfill a purpose, not to complete a story, but because the laws of nature allow it. And perhaps the deepest shift of all is this: once you see meaning as something that emerges rather than something assigned, you stop asking reality to justify itself. You begin paying attention instead. And attention, guided by curiosity and honesty, may be the closest thing to meaning that science ever needs to offer. Once we reach this point, something important happens to the original question. It no longer presses on us in the same way. The question of meaning does not disappear, but it loses its demand for a single final answer. Instead, it becomes an ongoing interaction between a thinking mind and a lawful universe. One reason this shift matters is that it changes how we relate to uncertainty. Humans are uncomfortable with not knowing. We evolved to act, decide, and commit under incomplete information. But the universe is under no obligation to be fully understandable to us. Expecting complete explanations may be a misunderstanding of our position inside reality. Physics has taught us this lesson repeatedly. At one time, people thought space and time were absolute. Later, they learned that both depend on motion and gravity. At one time, matter seemed solid and continuous. Later, it turned out to be mostly empty space and probability. Each time understanding deepened, the universe became stranger, not more familiar. The search for meaning follows the same pattern. The closer we look, the less it resembles a simple story. There is no central theme revealed by deeper analysis, only layers of structure, interaction, and emergence. Meaning does not sit at the bottom like a final explanation. It floats at the level where experience and understanding meet. This perspective also explains why disagreements about meaning never fully resolve. People are not arguing over a fact in the same way they argue about the mass of an electron. They are describing how their minds interact with reality, shaped by different experiences, cultures, and assumptions. Expecting one universal answer may be like expecting one universal taste in music. Yet this does not reduce everything to mere opinion. The physical world still constrains what is possible. Not all interpretations survive contact with reality. Science works precisely because it submits ideas to evidence, meaning, when grounded in honest observation, and understanding is more stable than meaning built on fantasy. There is a quiet discipline in this approach. It asks us to accept limits without resignation, to explore without demanding guarantees, to admit ignorance without turning it into despair or illusion. This is not a dramatic or heroic view of existence. It is a careful one. In this view, living does not require a cosmic mission. It requires attention. Attention to how things work, to what we can test, and to what we can learn. Curiosity becomes not a personality trait, but a natural response of a mind placed inside a complex, rule-governed world. Perhaps the most radical idea is that nothing is missing. The feeling that life lacks meaning may come from expecting something the universe never offered. When that expectation falls away, what remains is not emptiness but clarity. There is reality, behaving according to discoverable laws. There is awareness capable of noticing those laws, and there is the ongoing process of understanding, incomplete and temporary, but real. The universe does not owe us a reason for existing, and once we accept that, we are free to do what thinking systems do best: observe carefully, question honestly, and adjust our understanding when we are wrong. That process may not satisfy every emotional desire, but it aligns us with how reality actually behaves. Seen this way, the meaning of life is not a hidden answer waiting at the end of inquiry. It is the inquiry itself, carried out by matter, that has become aware enough to ask why it exists at all. After everything we have examined, the question of meaning no longer stands above life like a judgment waiting to be delivered. It sits quietly within it, shaped by awareness, limitation, and curiosity. What changes most is not the universe, but our expectation of what the universe should provide. We often assume that understanding reality should make it feel familiar or reassuring. But history shows the opposite. Each major scientific discovery has made the universe feel less centered on human concerns. Earth was not the center. The sun was not special. Our galaxy was not unique. Even time and space turned out to be flexible rather than absolute. Meaning follows the same trajectory. The deeper we look, the less it appears as a built-in feature of reality, and the more it appears as something that arises when a particular kind of mind encounters the world. This realization does not strip life of value. It changes the source of that value. Value no longer comes from fulfilling a pre-written purpose. It comes from participation, from being involved in the process of understanding, however incomplete that understanding may be. To exist as a thinking system in a lawful universe is already a rare condition, even if it is not guaranteed to last. There is also a quiet honesty in accepting that our explanations are provisional. We explain what we can, refine our ideas, and discard what fails. Meaning, in this sense, is not something we discover once and keep forever. It evolves as our understanding evolves. What mattered to humans centuries ago is not identical to what matters now, not because reality changed, but because our models of reality did. This makes the search for meaning less dramatic, but more grounded. It becomes less about revelation and more about alignment. Alignment with evidence, alignment with curiosity, alignment with the recognition that certainty is rare and humility is necessary. These are not emotional conclusions. They are practical ones. From this perspective, the universe does not appear cold or indifferent in a hostile sense. It simply follows rules. Indifference is not cruelty. It is neutrality. And neutrality is what allows understanding, A universe that constantly adjusted itself to human expectations would be impossible to study. Its reliability is precisely what makes knowledge possible. So the deepest shift may be this: instead of asking reality to explain itself in human terms, we learn to explain ourselves in physical terms. We see our thoughts, hopes, and questions as natural outcomes of complex systems interacting over time. This does not diminish them. It places them within a larger, coherent picture. In the end, the hidden meaning of life is not hidden behind the universe. It is woven into the act of observing it. Meaning is what happens when limited beings, aware of their limits, continue to ask careful questions anyway, not to reach a final answer, but to remain in contact with reality as it actually is. And perhaps that is the most scientific conclusion of all. Life does not come with an explanation, but it comes with the ability to seek one. And that ability, fragile and temporary as it is, may be the most meaningful thing the universe has produced so far. When all these ideas are taken together, a final perspective begins to form, not as a conclusion, but as a way of seeing. The universe appears less like a story with a message and more like a process unfolding according to consistent rules. Within that process, moments of awareness arise, observe what is happening, and then fade. We are living inside one of those moments. This perspective removes the expectation that reality must make sense in human terms. The universe was not designed to be intuitive. It was not shaped to satisfy our need for closure. The fact that it can be understood at all is already remarkable. The laws of physics could have been chaotic, inconsistent, or inaccessible. Instead, they are stable enough for understanding to grow. That stability is what allows meaning to form locally, even if it does not exist globally. When you understand something, even slightly better than before, there is a quiet sense of coherence. That coherence is not imposed from outside. It emerges naturally when a mind successfully models reality. In that sense, meaning is closely tied to understanding. It is what understanding feels like from the inside. This explains why confusion often feels like meaninglessness. When the world does not fit into our models, it feels empty or hostile. But when models improve, when questions sharpen and explanations align with evidence, that feeling changes. Meaning returns, not because the universe changed, but because our relationship with it did. There is no final model waiting at the end of inquiry. Every explanation remains open to revision. But this does not make the effort pointless. In science, progress does not require perfection. It requires correction. Each improved understanding reduces error, even if it never reaches absolute truth. Seen this way, existence is not a test with a hidden answer. It is an ongoing experiment. We are part of the system being studied, using tools created by the system itself to study it. This circularity is not a flaw. It is an unavoidable feature of being inside reality rather than outside it. This also reframes the fear of insignificance. Being small in scale does not mean being meaningless. A single observation can change how the universe is understood. A small insight can reshape entire fields of knowledge. Significance is not measured by duration or size, but by contribution to understanding. The universe will continue long after individual observers disappear. It continued long before they appeared. But during the brief interval in which observation is possible, something unique occurs. Reality becomes describable. Patterns become known. Questions become sharper. This is not a purpose assigned from outside. It is a consequence of lawful complexity. So the hidden meaning of life is not a secret embedded in the cosmos, waiting to be uncovered. It is the simple, unsettling fact that the universe allows itself to be understood, and that understanding happens through temporary, fragile minds like ours. Meaning is not something we find behind reality. It is something that happens when we engage with it honestly. And once this is seen clearly, the question shifts one last time. Instead of asking what life means, we begin to ask how clearly we are seeing it. And that question, unlike the first, is one we can actually work on.